Nothing in your external world needs to move for your experience of reality to change. And this is one of the most unsettling realizations a person can have. We grow up believing that relief arrives when circumstances shift, when people change, when answers appear, when something outside finally aligns. But the truth is quieter and far more immediate. The moment interpretation changes, reality already feels different, even if every external detail remains exactly the same. This happens because perception is not a passive window. It is an active filter, constantly shaping experience without asking for your permission. The brain does not show you the world as it is. It shows you a version that makes sense based on what it has learned to expect, fear, or protect against. Most of the time, this process is invisible. You don't notice interpretation happening. You experience it as fact. And then, sometimes, there is a subtle interruption, a pause where awareness steps in. Not to fix anything, not to argue, but simply to notice the lens itself. In that moment, the old filter weakens. Nothing external changes, yet everything feels different. Reality did not shift. The way you were seeing it did. This is because you have been wearing a mental filter for so long that you forgot it was there. Beliefs act like invisible glasses you never take off. They sit so close to perception that their presence is mistaken for truth. Thoughts repeat themselves over years, sometimes decades, and familiarity begins to feel like accuracy. This is just how things are. This is how people are. This is how I am. These statements feel solid not because they are true, but because they are rehearsed. There is emotional comfort in old interpretations, even painful ones. They provide predictability. The mind prefers a painful certainty over an unfamiliar openness. That is why noticing the filter can feel destabilizing at first. If this is just a lens, not reality itself, then what else have I been mistaking for fact? But this noticing is not meant to create confusion. It weakens the filter's control instantly. The moment you see that perception is shaped, it loosens its grip. You begin to realize that you do not see the world as it is. You see the world as your mind learned to protect you. One of the most dangerous confusions the mind creates is the belief that thought equals truth. Thoughts feel authoritative because they evolved to guide survival. The inner voice learned to speak urgently, convincingly, decisively, because hesitation once meant danger. This survival function is still active, even when the threat is psychological rather than physical. The mind produces narratives quickly and delivers them with emotional force, and because they arrive internally, they feel personal, intimate, trustworthy. But believing every thought distorts reality. It collapses perception into a single story and calls that story the world. Freedom does not come from eliminating thoughts. It comes from observing them. The moment a thought is seen as an event rather than a command, its authority weakens. You do not have to fight it. You do not have to replace it. You simply stop obeying it automatically. In that space, reality opens up. Not because something new appears, but because what was always there is no longer blocked by unquestioned narration. Emotions deepen this illusion. Feelings feel like evidence. Fear feels like proof that something is wrong. Urgency feels like proof that something must be done immediately. Desire feels like proof that fulfillment lies just beyond reach. Emotions are real experiences in the body, but the stories they generate are not inherently accurate. When emotion hijacks perception, interpretation hardens. The world looks threatening, limited, or demanding because the nervous system is activated, not because reality itself has changed. Reacting to feelings as if they were facts comes at a cost. It locks perception into survival mode. Emotional regulation is not about suppressing feeling. It is about creating internal safety that feelings can be experienced without turning into unquestioned conclusions. When regulation is present, emotion becomes information rather than instruction, and clarity becomes possible again. Emotions are real. The narratives they attach themselves to often are not. There is a moment in this process that feels almost like stepping backward, even though nothing external moves. The observer awakens. You begin to notice your thoughts instead of being inside them. This psychological distance is subtle, but it breaks suffering in a way that effort never could. Awareness does not solve problems the way the mind expects. It dissolves them by removing identification. When you watch the mind narrate reality, the narration loses its power to define it. The story keeps playing, but you are no longer trapped inside the character. Calm clarity follows, not because life becomes simple, but because you are no longer fused with every internal reaction. The world feels different because you are no longer arguing with it internally at every moment. This shift cannot stabilize without the body. A stressed nervous system creates a distorted world. When the body does not feel safe, perception narrows. Neutral situations look threatening. Ambiguity feels dangerous. The mind scans constantly for problems to solve or escape. Safety and perception are linked more deeply than most people realize. When the body slows down, when breathing deepens, when tension softens, perception recalibrates. You see more, you react less. Peace does not come after insight. Peace precedes it. A regulated system allows awareness to rest rather than hunt. And in that rest, reality stops feeling like something you must constantly defend yourself against. What makes this shift profound is that it cannot be undone. Once you see the lens, you cannot unsee it. You may still get pulled into old narratives, still feel emotions rise, still hear familiar thoughts, but something fundamental has changed. You know what is happening now. Awareness has interrupted the automatic process. This is not motivation, it is interruption. A pause inserted into a system that used to run without question. Afterward, a quiet clarity remains. Not excitement, not certainty about outcomes, just a deeper understanding of how experience is being shaped moment by moment. If you give these minutes your attention, you will not see reality the same way again. Not because reality changed, but because you finally see how you have been seeing. Once this shift has begun, something fundamental changes in how you relate to your own mind. Thoughts still arise, emotions still move through you, circumstances still unfold with uncertainty, but there's now a quiet separation between what happens and who you are. This separation is not emotional distance or indifference, it is perspective. You begin to sense that experience is moving through you rather than defining you. The mind may still offer commentary, explanations, predictions, warnings, but these no longer feel fused to reality itself. They feel like weather passing through awareness. This is often the moment people realize how much energy was previously spent trying to manage their inner world as if it were the world. Once that confusion loosens, the need to constantly correct, control, or explain experience begins to fade. Life does not become simpler, but it becomes less crowded. This is where the observer becomes stable rather than momentary. Earlier, awareness may have appeared in flashes, brief moments of clarity followed by immediate reabsorption into thought. Now, observation lingers. You notice patterns forming in real time. You see how a thought tries to recruit emotion, how emotion tries to recruit urgency, how urgency tries to force action. And because you are watching this sequence instead of being swept into it, it often dissolves before completion. Nothing needs to be suppressed. Nothing needs to be solved. The system simply does not escalate the way it used to. This is one of the most misunderstood aspects of awareness. It changes outcomes not by intervention, but by presence. When identification ends, momentum loses fuel. As this stabilizes, perception itself becomes more spacious. You notice more nuance, more possibility, more neutrality in situations that once felt charged. The world feels less personal, not in a detached way, but in a relieving one. Events no longer appear as constant commentary on your worth, your future, or your competence. They are just events. This does not make you passive. It makes you accurate. You respond based on what is actually happening rather than what the mind predicts might happen. This accuracy is often mistaken for calmness, but it is really clarity. You are no longer interpreting every moment through a lens of threat or desire. You are seeing more of what is actually there. The body plays a crucial role in maintaining this clarity. As the nervous system learns that not every internal signal requires immediate reaction, it gradually exits survival mode. Breathing deepens without effort. Muscles release tension they have been holding unconsciously. The sense of being rushed by life begins to soften. This is not because responsibilities disappear, but because the internal alarm system is no longer constantly activated. When the body feels safer, perception widens. You notice options where you once saw traps. You feel choice where you once felt compulsion. Safety is not something you think your way into. It is something the body learns through repeated experiences of not being overwhelmed by its own reactions. With this comes a subtle but powerful shift in decision-making. Choices stop being driven primarily by fear, urgency, or the need to relieve discomfort. They begin to emerge from alignment. This does not mean you always know exactly what to do. It means you can wait without panic. You can pause without feeling like you are falling behind. This patience is not passive. It is informed. It comes from trusting perception rather than narration. You no longer need to rush into action to quiet the mind, because the mind is already quieter. Action, when it comes, feels cleaner, less forced, less compensatory. You are not trying to fix yourself through movement. You are responding to reality as it is. One of the most profound realizations at this stage is how much suffering was created not by circumstances, but by constant interpretation layered on top of them. When narration slows, experience becomes simpler, even when it is difficult. Pain still exists, but it is no longer multiplied by story. Uncertainty still exists, but it is no longer treated as danger. This does not make you immune to emotional challenges. It makes you resilient to them. Resilience here does not mean toughness. It means flexibility. The ability to feel without being consumed, to think without being commanded, to act without being driven by fear of inner state. Over time, this changes how you relate to problems themselves. Problems stop feeling like personal failures or urgent threats that define your future. They become situations to engage with, respond to, or sometimes leave alone. The need to immediately understand everything dissolves. You realize that clarity does not always arrive as explanation. Sometimes it arrives as the absence of unnecessary interpretation. This is where many people stop overthinking, not because they learned a technique, but because the habit lost its purpose. Overthinking was an attempt to control uncertainty. When uncertainty is no longer experienced as dangerous, the habit fades on its own. This shift also alters your relationship with meaning. Meaning no longer needs to be extracted from every experience. You stop asking what everything is supposed to teach you. Life does not feel like a puzzle that must constantly be decoded. Meaning becomes something that emerges naturally through engagement rather than analysis. You participate more and narrate less. This is not a rejection of thought or reflection. It is a rebalancing. Thought returns to its proper role as a tool rather than a ruler. As awareness deepens, you may notice that certain conversations, environments, or activities no longer stimulate you the way they once did. This is not loss of interest in life. It is loss of resonance with mental noise. Stimulation that once fed anxiety or identity no longer has the same appeal. Quiet becomes richer. Simplicity becomes more satisfying. This is often when people realize how much of their previous busyness was an attempt to avoid being with their own internal state. Now that the internal state is more stable, the compulsion to distract weakens. You can be with yourself without discomfort, and that changes everything. There is also a growing sense of irreversibility that accompanies this clarity. You may still have moments of confusion, still get caught in old reactions briefly, still experience emotional turbulence, but something fundamental has shifted underneath all of that. You know what is happening now. You see the mechanism. You recognize the lens. And once this recognition is present, you cannot fully return to unconscious identification. Even when you are pulled in, awareness eventually reasserts itself. This is not effort. It is understanding settling in. This is why true insight does not feel like motivation. Motivation is temporary and requires constant renewal. Insight changes structure. It alters how experience is processed. After this shift, you may still seek growth, understanding, or depth, but the seeking no longer comes from lack. It comes from curiosity rather than desperation. You are no longer trying to escape your current experience. You are exploring it. What remains after this process is not certainty about life, but trust in perception. You trust that you can see clearly enough to respond. You trust that you do not need to believe every thought to function. You trust that emotions can move without dictating reality. This trust is quiet and embodied. It does not announce itself. It simply stabilizes you. This is why once this perception shift occurs, it cannot truly be undone. Reality itself does not change. The lens through which you see it does. And once you have seen the lens, you can never fully mistake it for the world again. You may still use it. You may still look through it at times, but you will know that it is a lens. And that knowledge changes everything, not loudly, not dramatically, but permanently.